Ladies and gentlemen, relationships are among the most intricate puzzles of human existence, and often they seem impossible to solve. We are drawn together by forces we can barely articulate, yet driven apart by misunderstandings that cut deeper than we realize. And there, within that fragile dance of connection, lies a powerful truth. The way we engage with one another can either liberate or imprison us. This is particularly true when it comes to men, who so often mask their true feelings behind walls of silence or stoic resolve. It's easy to grow frustrated, to wonder why he doesn't express what you so desperately want to hear. But let me challenge that perception. Let me suggest that the answer isn't to demand, to accuse, or to force. No, the answer is far more profound, and it lies in 4 deliberate, transformative actions. These actions are not about manipulation or control. They are about creating an environment so authentic, so safe, and so deeply connected that he cannot help but lay bare his innermost thoughts and feelings. He'll beg, not out of weakness, but because he will finally understand the strength in vulnerability. He'll cry, not because he's broken, but because he trusts you enough to let the floodgates open. And he'll admit everything, not from fear of losing you, but from the realization that the only way to truly keep you is through honesty. This is not easy, nor is it simple. It requires courage, self-awareness, and a commitment to becoming the kind of person who fosters trust rather than fear. But if you're willing to engage in this process, to step into the unknown, you will unlock a depth of connection that transforms not only your relationship, but also yourself. Let's begin. Vulnerability is a concept that cuts to the very heart of what it means to be human. It is the recognition of our limitations, our insecurities, and our fears. But more than that, it is the willingness to expose these truths to another person in the hope of forging a connection that transcends superficiality. In relationships, particularly romantic ones, vulnerability is not merely a desirable trait. It is a necessity. Without it, the bonds we form remain fragile, unable to withstand the inevitable challenges that arise when 2 complex individuals attempt to share a life together. For men, vulnerability is often an especially challenging proposition. Society has conditioned many of them to equate emotional openness with weakness, to believe that their value lies in their ability to remain stoic, strong, and unaffected. This is a misconception, and a dangerous one at that. It is not strength to hide behind a facade of invulnerability. True strength lies in the ability to confront one's own emotions, to admit to fear, pain, or confusion, and to seek understanding from another. But here's where the dynamic becomes intricate. If a man is to be vulnerable, he must feel that the space he is stepping into is safe. Safety, in this context, does not mean the absence of conflict or challenge. It means the absence of judgment and ridicule. It means creating an environment where his expressions, however halting or imperfect, are met with empathy rather than disdain. This is a profound responsibility, and one that should not be taken lightly. To create such an environment requires self-awareness and intentionality. It demands that you examine your own responses to vulnerability. Are you willing to accept someone's raw emotions without leaping to criticize or solve? Can you sit with their discomfort without allowing it to overwhelm you? These are not easy tasks, but they are essential ones. Vulnerability also requires reciprocity. It is unreasonable to expect someone to open up to you if you are unwilling to do the same. This is not to suggest that you should bare your soul at every opportunity. Boundaries are important, after all. But there is power in showing that you too are human, that you too struggle and falter. It is through this mutual acknowledgement of imperfection that true intimacy is born. Consider this: when you share a vulnerable truth about yourself, what you are really doing is extending an invitation. You are saying, "Here is who I am," without pretense or polish. Will you meet me here? And when that invitation is met with acceptance, it creates a bond that is both deep and resilient. This is the essence of what it means to be connected, to see and be seen, to know and be known. Yet it is important to note that vulnerability is not the same as oversharing or emotional recklessness. It is not about unloading every thought and feeling without regard for the other person's capacity to receive it. Vulnerability in its truest form is an act of courage and generosity. It is the willingness to expose your inner world in a way that invites understanding, not obligation. For men who have been conditioned to fear vulnerability, this can be an incredibly difficult shift to make. It requires unlearning deeply ingrained beliefs and replacing them with new ones, beliefs that recognize the power of emotional authenticity. This is where you come in. By modeling vulnerability yourself, by responding to his openness with compassion and curiosity, you create a framework that allows him to see vulnerability not as a liability but as a strength. But let us not forget, this process is not linear. There will be setbacks and misunderstandings. There will be moments when the effort seems futile, when old patterns of defensiveness and withdrawal resurface. This is normal, and it is no reason to give up. Change is rarely easy, but it is always possible. Vulnerability is not just a tool for building stronger relationships. It is a path to deeper self-awareness. By engaging in the practice of vulnerability, you learn to confront your own fears and insecurities. You learn to accept yourself in all your complexity, and in doing so, you become more capable of accepting others. Human connection is one of the most intricate and profound aspects of existence. It is the invisible thread that ties us together, the foundation upon which societies are built, and the framework that gives our lives meaning. Yet for all its significance, the process of forming and maintaining these connections is anything but simple. It is a dance of vulnerabilities, expectations, and misunderstandings, each of which has the potential to strengthen or unravel the bond between two people. When we speak about connection, especially in the context of relationships, we often imagine it as an effortless meeting of minds and hearts. But this idealized view glosses over the reality of what it means to truly connect with another person. Connection requires effort, intentionality, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself, about the other person, and about the relationship itself. Consider for a moment the layers of complexity involved in understanding another human being. Every person you encounter is a walking narrative, a living story shaped by experiences, values, fears, and dreams. And here's the challenge. That story is often incomplete, fragmented, and at times contradictory. People are not linear, they are dynamic. They carry within them a multitude of identities, some of which may never fully reveal themselves. Now, think about what happens when two such narratives collide in the context of a relationship. You are not merely interacting with a single person, you are engaging with the entirety of their history, their culture, their beliefs, and their expectations. And they are doing the same with you. This is why relationships are so difficult and so transformative. They force you to confront aspects of yourself that you might otherwise ignore. For men, this complexity is often compounded by societal norms that discourage emotional openness. Many men have been taught explicitly or implicitly that their worth is tied to their ability to solve problems, to provide, and to protect. Emotional needs in this framework are seen as weaknesses to be suppressed or ignored. But the suppression of these needs does not make them disappear. It merely buries them beneath layers of denial and self-reliance. When a man withdraws from a relationship, when he stops texting, stops communicating, or seems emotionally distant, it is rarely because he has stopped caring. More often, it is because he is grappling with an internal conflict that he does not yet have the tools to articulate. He may be overwhelmed by expectations, paralyzed by fear of vulnerability, or uncertain about his place in the relationship. Understanding this is crucial because it shifts the focus from judgment to compassion. Compassion does not mean excusing hurtful behavior or accepting less than you deserve. It means recognizing that behind every action or inaction, there is a reason. By seeking to understand that reason, you create an opportunity for growth and healing, both for yourself and for the relationship. But let us be clear, understanding does not equal enabling. A healthy connection requires boundaries. It requires a balance between empathy and accountability. If a man is unwilling or unable to confront his own emotional barriers, that is his responsibility, not yours. Your role is not to fix him, but to support him in his journey towards self-awareness, provided that he is willing to take the first step. To foster a deeper connection, you must also be willing to examine your own role in the dynamic. Are there ways in which your actions or expectations might be contributing to the distance between you? Are there unspoken fears or insecurities that are influencing how you communicate and relate? This kind of self-reflection is not easy, but it is essential. It allows you to approach the relationship from a place of clarity rather than projection. Human connection at its core is about mutual recognition. It is the act of seeing and being seen, of knowing and being known. This requires a level of honesty that many of us are not accustomed to practicing. Honesty with ourselves first and foremost, and then honesty with the other person. It means acknowledging the parts of yourself that you might prefer to hide, your doubts, your fears, your flaws, and inviting the other person to do the same. This process is inherently risky. There is no guarantee that your vulnerability will be met with understanding, no assurance that the connection you seek will be reciprocated. But without risk, there is no reward. The depth of your relationships will always be proportional to the depth of your willingness to engage with the unknown. As we delve deeper into this topic, let us explore what it means to navigate the complexities of connection with courage and intention. How can we create relationships that are not only fulfilling but also transformative? How can we balance the needs of the self with the needs of the other? These are the questions that lie at the heart of human connection, and they are questions worth answering. When we speak of vulnerability, especially emotional vulnerability, the term is often misunderstood, misrepresented as weakness or fragility. It is as if to expose oneself emotionally is to invite rejection or exploitation. But let me assure you, vulnerability is not a symptom of weakness. It is a profound expression of strength. It is a deliberate act of courage that requires us to face the most unpredictable and uncontrollable aspects of human relationships, other people and their responses to us. To open yourself emotionally is to willingly step into uncertainty. It is to acknowledge that the control you think you have over how others perceive you is, at best, illusory. And yet, in spite of that acknowledgement, you still choose to show parts of yourself that could easily be misunderstood, dismissed, or even ridiculed. Why would anyone do this? Why take the risk of baring your heart, knowing full well the potential for pain? The answer lies in the nature of human connection itself. Relationships, genuine, meaningful relationships, are built not on the facade of perfection, but on the foundation of authenticity. People are not drawn to you because you are flawless. They are drawn to you because you are real. And to be real means to reveal the parts of yourself that you might otherwise prefer to keep hidden. The doubts, the fears, the insecurities, these are the aspects of your humanity that others recognize in themselves. Think for a moment about the alternative. If you hide your vulnerability, if you construct a persona that projects only strength and confidence, what kind of connection are you inviting? Superficial at best, deceptive at worst. You may attract admiration, but admiration is not the same as love. Love requires an exchange of truths, not a performance of ideals. But vulnerability is not only essential for connection, it is also a catalyst for personal growth. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you are forced to confront your own limitations and fears. You are challenged to develop the resilience to withstand rejection, to navigate disappointment, and to emerge stronger and more self-aware. In this sense, vulnerability is not just an act of courage, it is an act of self-development. Consider the man who struggles to communicate his feelings. Perhaps he has been conditioned to believe that emotions are a sign of weakness, that his role is to solve problems rather than express them. This conditioning is not his fault, but it is his responsibility to overcome it. Because the inability to express vulnerability does not shield him from pain, it isolates him within it. It creates a barrier that prevents genuine connection, both with others and with himself. And what about you? If you are in a relationship with such a man, how do you respond? Do you mirror his emotional distance, guarding yourself against the pain of rejection? Or do you choose to model the vulnerability that you wish to see in him? This is not about taking on the role of a savior or fixer. It is about demonstrating through your own actions what it means to be emotionally honest and open. But let's not romanticize vulnerability. It is not a magic solution to the complexities of human relationships. Being vulnerable does not guarantee that your openness will be met with understanding or reciprocation. There will be times when your vulnerability is met with indifference, misunderstanding, or even cruelty. This is the risk inherent in the act of opening yourself. Yet, it is precisely this risk that gives vulnerability its power. If there were no possibility of rejection, then vulnerability would require no courage. It is the presence of risk that transforms vulnerability from a passive state into an active choice. And it is this choice that defines the strength of your character. But how do you practice vulnerability in a way that is both courageous and wise? First, you must recognize that vulnerability is not synonymous with oversharing. It is not about divulging every detail of your life to anyone who will listen. Rather, it is about discerning what aspects of yourself are worth sharing and with whom. Vulnerability requires trust, and trust must be earned. You do not owe your vulnerability to anyone who has not demonstrated a willingness to honor it. But when you find someone who has earned your trust, do not withhold the parts of yourself that you fear might be judged or rejected, because in doing so, you deny them the opportunity to know you fully, and you deny yourself the opportunity to be known. The beauty of vulnerability is that it creates space for transformation. When you are vulnerable, you invite others to meet you on a deeper level. You challenge them to confront their own fears and insecurities, to reciprocate the honesty that you have offered. This is how relationships grow, not through the avoidance of discomfort, but through the shared experience of navigating it. So, as we move forward, let us examine how we can cultivate the strength to be vulnerable, how we can discern when and with whom to share our truths, and how we can create relationships that are not only resilient, but also profoundly meaningful. Because in the end, vulnerability is not just about connection. It is about courage, growth, and the pursuit of a life that is truly authentic. Clarity is a virtue that few truly understand, yet it is indispensable in every facet of human interaction. When we speak of clarity, we're referring to the ability to articulate your needs, your values, and your expectations with precision and honesty. It is the antidote to chaos, the means by which confusion is dispelled and relationships are guided toward constructive outcomes. And yet clarity is not an easy virtue to cultivate. It demands introspection, discipline, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. One of the most overlooked aspects of clarity is the necessity of boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are not barriers meant to isolate you from others. Instead, they are structures that define where you end and another person begins. They are the framework within which respect, trust, and love can thrive. Without boundaries, relationships become mired in ambiguity, and ambiguity breeds resentment. Consider the nature of a boundary. It is not a tool for control, but a declaration of self-respect. When you set a boundary, you are not saying to another person, "This is what you must do." You are saying, "This is what I require to maintain my integrity." There is a profound difference between these two statements. One seeks to impose, the other seeks to clarify. Yet, the act of setting boundaries is fraught with challenges. It requires you to confront the fear of rejection, the fear of being perceived as difficult or unyielding. But what is the alternative? To live without boundaries is to invite exploitation, to allow your needs and values to be overshadowed by the demands of others. This is not selflessness, it is self-abandonment. Now let us delve into how clarity and boundaries intersect. To set a boundary, you must first be clear with yourself about what you need and why you need it. This requires a level of self-awareness that many avoid. It is far easier to blame others for crossing boundaries than to take the time to understand why those boundaries are necessary in the first place. For example, in a relationship, you might feel disrespected when your partner interrupts you. But before you can address this, you must understand why it matters to you. Is it a matter of feeling unheard? Is it tied to deeper insecurities about your voice and its value? This process of self-inquiry is crucial because it allows you to communicate your boundary not as an accusation, but as a reflection of your needs. And once you have identified your boundary, the next step is to communicate it clearly. This is where many falter. They assume that their needs should be self-evident, that others should intuitively know what is acceptable and what is not. But people are not mind readers. If you do not articulate your boundaries, you cannot expect others to respect them. Clarity in communication is not enough. You must also enforce your boundaries with consistency. This is where the true challenge lies. It is easy to state a boundary, but difficult to uphold it when doing so requires confrontation or discomfort. Yet every time you allow a boundary to be crossed without consequence, you undermine its legitimacy. Enforcing boundaries is not an act of aggression. It is an act of self-respect. It is a way of saying, I take my needs seriously and I expect others to do the same. This does not mean that you must respond to every boundary violation with anger or hostility. In fact, the most effective enforcement often comes from a place of calm assertiveness. Now, let us consider how this applies to your interactions with others. When someone sets a boundary with you, how do you respond? Do you respect their needs, or do you view their boundary as an inconvenience or a challenge? Your response reveals much about your character and your capacity for empathy. To respect another person's boundary is to acknowledge their humanity, to recognize that they too have needs and values that deserve consideration. In essence, clarity and boundaries are not just tools for navigating relationships. They are expressions of your commitment to authenticity. They allow you to show up fully in your interactions with others, free from the burden of unspoken expectations and unresolved resentments. As we continue, let us explore how cultivating clarity and setting boundaries can transform not only our relationships, but also our sense of self-worth. Because when you are clear about who you are and what you need, you create the conditions for a life that is not only meaningful, but also deeply fulfilling. Consistency and patience are virtues that serve as the bedrock for meaningful progress in any endeavor, be it personal growth, relationships, or professional achievements. These qualities are not glamorous. They lack the immediate appeal of quick fixes and grand gestures. Yet, they are what sustain us when enthusiasm wanes and challenges arise. They are the slow burn that fuels enduring transformation. Consistency is not merely about repetition, it is about intentional repetition. It is the conscious decision to act in alignment with your goals and values day after day, even when the rewards are not immediately visible. Think of the process of building a structure. Each brick you lay might seem insignificant on its own, but over time, those bricks form walls, and those walls form a shelter. Without consistency, there is no shelter, only scattered efforts that lead nowhere. In relationships, consistency communicates reliability and trustworthiness. When you show up consistently for another person, whether through your actions, words, or presence, you are demonstrating that you value the relationship enough to invest in it regularly. But consistency is not just about external actions. It begins internally, with your commitment to maintain integrity in how you engage with others and yourself. This is where patience comes into play. Patience is the ability to endure the discomfort of delayed gratification, to stay the course, even when the results you desire are not yet evident. It requires faith, not blind faith, but a reasoned belief that your efforts, guided by intention and purpose, will yield fruit in due time. Patience is what allows you to see the value in the process, not just the outcome. Consider the example of nurturing a plant. You cannot force it to grow faster by tugging at its leaves. You must water it, provide sunlight, and protect it from harm, all while waiting for it to bloom in its own time. The same principle applies to personal development and relationships. Growth cannot be rushed. It must be cultivated with care and patience. Many people struggle with patience because they are focused on immediate results. They want their efforts to be acknowledged and rewarded without delay. But true growth does not operate on a timeline dictated by impatience. It unfolds according to principles that often defy our desires for instant gratification. The question then is whether you can remain steadfast in your commitment when the rewards are not yet visible. Patience also requires humility. It is an acknowledgement that you do not control every variable, that life operates according to forces larger than your immediate will. This does not mean you should be passive. On the contrary, it means you must act with intention while accepting that some outcomes are beyond your control. Patience teaches us to balance effort with surrender, to do what we can and trust that the rest will follow. In the context of relationships, patience is essential because human beings are complex, imperfect, and ever-changing. You cannot expect someone to meet your needs or understand your perspective instantly. Building a deep connection takes time, as does resolving conflicts and fostering mutual understanding. Patience allows you to navigate the inevitable challenges of relationships with grace and resilience. At its core, the interplay between consistency and patience reflects a profound truth. Meaningful change is a process, not an event. It is a journey that requires discipline, perseverance, and a willingness to endure setbacks without losing sight of your purpose. This is not an easy path, but it is the only path that leads to genuine fulfillment. Reflection is the bridge between experience and wisdom. It is the process through which we extract meaning from the chaos of our lives, sifting through the noise to find patterns, lessons, and truths. Without reflection, we risk becoming creatures of habit, endlessly repeating the same mistakes, unable to see beyond our immediate circumstances. Reflection requires effort, humility, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we inhabit. To reflect is to ask, what did this experience teach me? It is not a passive exercise. True reflection demands active engagement with your past actions, decisions, and their consequences. It involves looking not only at what went wrong, but also at what went right, recognizing the seeds of progress amidst the rubble of failure. This is not an exercise in self-criticism or self-congratulation. It is a practice of honest self-assessment, and honesty, as we know, is not for the faint of heart. Growth emerges from this reflective process. Growth is not simply about adding new skills or knowledge. It is about transformation. It is about becoming a better version of yourself, one that is more capable, more resilient, and more attuned to the complexities of existence. But growth is not linear. It is messy, unpredictable, and often painful. It requires you to step outside your comfort zone, to venture into the unknown with the hope but not the guarantee of finding something better. Facing the unknown is perhaps the greatest challenge of all. The unknown is where our fears reside, where our insecurities come to life. It is the territory of uncertainty, where control slips through our fingers and we are left to navigate with only our courage and intuition as guides. Yet, it is also the realm of possibility, where new opportunities and experiences await. To grow, we must venture into this space, even though it terrifies us. Courage is the virtue that allows us to face the unknown. It is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Courage does not mean recklessness. It means calculated risk-taking, the willingness to move forward even when the path ahead is unclear. It means trusting that you have the strength to handle whatever comes your way, even if you cannot predict it. In relationships, courage manifests as vulnerability. It means opening yourself up to another person, knowing full well that you might be hurt. It means expressing your needs, desires, and boundaries, even when doing so feels uncomfortable. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is strength in its most authentic form. It is the foundation of intimacy and trust, the bedrock upon which meaningful connections are built. Reflection, growth, and courage are intertwined. Reflection provides the insight needed to identify areas for growth. Growth requires the courage to change, to let go of old habits and embrace new possibilities. And courage is strengthened through reflection as we learn from our past and prepare for the future. Together, these principles form a cycle of continuous improvement, a path toward becoming the person you were meant to be. As we continue, let us delve deeper into what it means to live with intentionality and purpose. Because life is not merely about survival, it is about flourishing. It is about rising to the challenges before us and becoming more than we thought possible. The journey is not easy, but it is worth it. Let us move forward with courage, clarity, and the resolve to make the most of this extraordinary gift called life.